and talk about what kind of made myself a surprise in this business and the lessons learned there. And hopefully some of that resonates with those of you who are brand new on this call, seeing this for the first time, and helps you understand that, hey, you're not fighting this battle alone. So as most of you know, I had a pretty successful career previous to joining Symmetry, and that was all in food and beverage. I started about 18 years old. Needed a job to help pay the bills while I was in college, and so I started working as a dishwasher and a prep cook. And as time went by, I saw more and more success in that business while I was going to college. Moved up to line cook, then a lead saute cook. And by the time I finished college, decided that my future lay not in going to law school, but in restaurants and professional kitchens. And so I continued to pursue that up until about 2 years ago. I worked through the ranks, cook, sous chef, executive chef, food and beverage director, standalone restaurants, hotels, everything from flipping burgers to French fine dining and all points in between. And along that way, with every step, every promotion came more money, but also more responsibility and frankly, more frustration. Anybody who's ever spent significant time in that industry knows what that looks like. Sorry, it's, some of these memories as I'm talking are a little bit traumatic almost to think about. So give me just a minute here. But, through that journey, there were a lot of highs, but there were also a lot of lows. I can tell you I've been called just about every name under the sun by people that I look up to and respect. They've torn me down until I felt about this big. And then, expecting me to come back to work the next day with a smile and get the job done. I have had oven doors slammed shut on my arm multiple times in the course of a day. I have been hit with saute pans coming straight off the burner. I've had one chef who liked to, when he was upset, throw plates across the kitchen where they smashed on the station right above all of my mise en place, and I got hit with, sharp shards of porcelain. I tell you all that not to elicit any sort of pity, but to tell you that coming in here, I thought I was pretty damn tough. I'd put up with some stuff along the way. So what could insurance throw at me that I hadn't already handled, right? I've been to the hospital multiple times for stitches and for second and third degree burns, had to get tetanus shots because I burned half the skin off my left hand one time. Been through a lot. So what could insurance throw at me? Well, how many of you know this story, right? You came in here, you got your license, you did your summit training, you learned your scripts, and then it was time you bought your first set of leads. And you pick up the phone, you made that first dial, and they didn't answer. You're like, oh, thank God. Then you moved on to the next person, and they didn't answer. And you said, oh, thank God. And then you got to the third person, and it rang, and you dialed them back, and it rang, and they answered. And you started going into your script, and you got about 4 words in, and they said something to the effect of, how many times have I told you to stop calling me? I don't want what you have to sell. You're a liar. I never filled that out. You're a horrible person. Anybody heard something along those lines before? Right? So tough guy. I've cut my fingertip off. I've been to the hospital for burns. I've been called every name under the sun. I can handle that, right? I'm going to shake that off. No. Boy, the second they slammed that phone down on me, I went downstairs to Paige and I said, the guy on the other end of the phone was really, really mean to me, and he called me a liar, and I don't think I can do this anymore. Right? Anybody done that one? Yep. So what I learned is that it takes a different kind of toughness to be here. And I didn't learn that lesson quickly. I stopped dialing that day, and I didn't start again for another 2 weeks. And that time, I think I made it through 8 leads before somebody was mean to me, and I repeated the entire scene over and over and over again. And stretched this scene out for about 6 months. Now, in that time, and Paige will verify this to you, we had some difficulties, right? We'd just gotten married. His first 6 months of marriage. We just moved across the country. We were facing some stuff, and I was probably not most of that time a very pleasant person to be around. And through some difficult conversations between us, we decided that, okay, you know what? It's time for me to talk to somebody else. It's time to get into therapy. Because you see, all of these good things had happened in my life, right? I had just married the love of my life. We'd moved away from a place that I hated back to a place in Idaho that I love. We were setting up our lives together. We were soon to find out that we were going to have a baby. All of these good things were happening, and yet I could not find it in myself to be happy. So, cue therapy. And I remember sitting down for my first meeting with Ryan, the awesome therapist that I worked with for several months. And, he said, "Why are you here?" And I told him the same thing I just told you. I can't, looking in from the outside, I've got everything I want in life. Why can I not be happy about it consistently? And we talked about my past, and we talked about my background in the restaurant, really how much of my identity was tied to my success as a chef, how much of my feelings of confidence and self-worth were tied to what I'd done for the last almost 2 decades. And he asked me this question. He said, "Hunter, have you ever taken time to mourn the end of your previous career?" I thought that was a really interesting question to ask, because you mourn people, you mourn, friends, family when they pass and they leave, but nobody thinks about mourning an experience. Nobody thinks about mourning a job that you no longer do. But he said, it's a loss just like anything else, particularly the way you describe it, because so much of your identity was wrapped up in who you were as a chef. And you haven't taken the time to properly mourn that. And I thought about that for about 2 weeks before I fully understood what he meant. He meant I was going through a grief cycle, right? We all know the 5 stages of grief, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I was going through that. See, I was denying that I needed to become somebody different in order to do something different. I was angry that people didn't see how hard I thought I was working and just wanted me to do more. I would bargain with Paige. "Hey, if I go dial for 2 hours, can I not do it anymore this week?" I was depressed, right? I was going through these phases, not understanding where they were coming from. But by putting a name on it, I was able to start moving past it and realize that had bought in for a long time to a paradigm that says hard work equals success leads to happiness. Anybody here read The Happiness Advantage? I know, Tom, you have. Yep. And in that book, reading through it and understanding the kind of the keys to happiness and success, one of the central points of it is that this paradigm, hard work leads to success, leads to happiness, has everything backwards. See, successful people aren't happy because they're successful, right? They're successful because they found that happiness first. They're successful because they found a way to be content with themselves, to be positive in their outlook on life, and that brought about their success. Happy people are more attractive to those around them. You want to talk about building a business? You want to talk about attracting people, the right kind of people who want to work with you? It's about finding that happiness in yourself first. See, no new recruit is going to make you happy. No policy that you sell is going to make you happy. But making yourself happy will attract a recruit to you and help them stay. Making yourself happy will make a client more likely to want to work with you. So finding that positive, Lisa, the book is called The Happiness Advantage. Highly, highly recommend. Because what I've found in this business, and what many of you are probably finding right now, is that in our previous careers, with bosses, with colleagues, with competition in the corporate workplace, validation was all external. A customer liked a dish I put together. The chef was happy with how fast I worked. The servers were happy with how quickly the plates came out, right? That was my measure of success, all coming from other people. So I never had to build confidence in myself. Everybody else, their feedback gave me a false, inflated sense of confidence. Well, what happens when you took me out of that environment where I was successful? All my confidence went away. All my validation went away. Now it was on me to find worth in myself. And I didn't know how to do that. I'd never had to know how to do that. I spent all my life waiting for somebody else to say, I'm proud of you, without ever asking the question, am I proud of me? Am I proud of what I'm doing? And it seems like such a small shift, but think about that semantic difference. See, when I'm proud of what I did, when I'm proud of me, it doesn't matter whether Paige is or not. I hope she is, but I already have my internal validation. I already know my internal worth. And when you know your worth internally, that's much harder for somebody else to shake. That's much harder for a client hanging up the phone on you to disturb, right? Because when I say it, it's truth. But when you say it, it's a lie. How many times have we heard that, right? So I guess what I'm saying here for everybody brand new or still trying to find their path in this business is that the first thing you have to do is let go of your past. Because what made you successful previously, it's not going to cut it here. It just isn't. That's why you're here. You're here because what you were doing was not where you wanted to be and not who you wanted to be. So you can't keep repeating the same behavior and expecting just your presence here to carry you forward. You have to grow. You have to move beyond who you used to be. I know I'm not the only person with this story, and I've taken up a little bit more time than I wanted to. But I wanted to ask Margaret to jump in here for a few minutes, because for those of you who don't know, Margaret has an amazing past, right? Straight out of college, she went to work in the ag industry in a job that even her own father told her she couldn't do simply because she was a woman, right? It was a man's industry.
Hey, are you telling my story?
I'm setting you up, okay? And Margaret had an extremely successful career coming here in sales, no less. So, right, who would be more natural to come in here, bring that sales experience, and find massive success here? Margaret, why don't you pick it up from there? Just wanted to set it up a little bit for you.
Well, thank you. So it's hard to follow Hunter's story because that was pretty emotional, and thank you for being so vulnerable. So as Hunter said, when I went to college, my goal when I went to college was to be a veterinarian. And I came from basically, a straight A student in high school. Well, maybe I had a couple of A minuses and maybe a B or so, but really, high school was really, really easy for me. Went into college, thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. My first quarter, I got straight B's. Actually, my best grade was in chemistry, and that was a B plus. So I went to the counselor and I said, something's wrong. There's all zeros on here. He said, my dear, those aren't zeros, those are D's. So that was my first big failure. I figured out that you can't party and go to college and do what you were doing before and be successful. So I had to make some changes. And over the course of the next year, I did manage to get myself on the other dean's list. Instead of the one they were going to kick me out of college, it was the one that they were actually saying, congratulations, you're going to make it here. So anyway, I worked my way through that and met with my counselor, and they said, you really want to be a veterinarian because the fact of the matter is you have absolutely no experience in this field. You've never worked for a vet. You've only owned a dog and a cat, and I wanted to be a large animal vet. So they said that probably isn't going to be your best choice of a career because you're going into a college where, everybody here has some experience. You might want to think about that. So I said, okay, great. I'll go into agriculture. I mean, there was a few steps along the way that led me to that. My dad was in agriculture, grew up my whole life. Our vacations were centered around him doing business on every farm between Southern California and Idaho, which made a nice 2-week vacation, actually about a 4-day vacation because it's traveling, sowing seed to farms. But that's how we grew up. And so I grew up in ag and I thought, I really enjoyed it. That's the direction I'm going to go. And like Hunter said, when I told my mom and dad that, my dad was livid, pissed. My mom cried, said, this isn't a field for women. You're going to fail miserably. And we don't think that you should do this. And I really respected my dad's opinion on things. But this is kind of where Paige gets her stubbornness. As soon as somebody tells you can't do it, I was, by God, I'm going to do it. So I went into the career of agriculture, and I actually became the first woman seed salesman in the country in that industry. And so that was pretty exciting, but it came with its set of challenges. I was in a man's world, and literally every time I was successful, I had somebody trying to undermine my success. And I remember one of the first jobs I had, which they actually created the position for me. This is kind of a cool story on determination, but back when I was in college, we didn't have emails, we didn't have the internet, and so I wanted a job with a seed company. So I took the California Seed Association handbook and literally hand wrote a letter and sent my resume to every single company in that book. And it was probably over 150 companies there. And every time I got a rejection, if it was a positive rejection, like we don't have anything right now, maybe later, they got another letter and another resume from me. And I just kept doing this. And finally, this company that ended up hiring me said, we're tired of seeing your resume come across our desk. I want you to come down for an interview. So I did, and I got the job. Being the only woman salesperson on the force, I did not get a company car. I had to drive my own vehicle. And so finally, when I went in and said, this is really unfair, I want a company car, they said, great, they bought me a Volkswagen Rabbit. Oh, here I am going out to farms in a Volkswagen Rabbit, and all of my colleagues had pickup trucks. So that was one example. And it's like throughout my entire career, somebody was trying to undermine my success. And when I moved up to Idaho and started selling seed, I didn't know a soul up here, decided that I didn't want to live in California anymore. We moved to Idaho. I talked one of my customers into letting me come up here and sell seed. So virtually I started knocking on tractor doors to sell seed. And I became, I had over 51% of the market, which was pretty good considering I had 4 other competitors. So I was good at sales, no doubt about it, I could sell. And it was relationship type sale. It wasn't, the don't leave until you get the business type sale. But when I was doing this, my counterpart in Washington didn't like the fact that I was beating him. And so he went to my company and tried to undermine my success by making me get a 2-wheel drive truck instead of a 4-wheel drive truck. And I was driving over the Blues Mountains, which in the wintertime is awful, towing a trailer that weighed more than my truck, and just setting myself up for disaster. So I fought that and finally convinced him that I needed the 4-wheel truck. Then he decided to go ahead and start, he said that I couldn't hire somebody to deliver my seed. So I was doing over $3 million in sales in basically 2 months and having to deliver thousands of buckets of seed that weighed about 70 pounds apiece, all by myself, because they wouldn't allow me to hire somebody to help. Yet they had 3 people in Washington delivering his business, and he was doing less than me. So this is just the battle that I had my entire career. But I thought I was happy. I was successful. I was doing a good job. I was always getting awards for my sales. I don't know if you can see my cabinet behind me, but I got award after award after award for top sales, lowest inventory, highest profitability. And I thought I was doing great. I was beating the system, and I was winning over these people that were just dead set on sabotaging my career. And then I went into recruiting. So I did recruiting for 11 years in agriculture, and I was doing executive recruiting. Again, I was doing a fantastic job, knocking it out of the park. My supervisor did a fraction of what I did. And one year when they had incentives every year where you could win trips for doing a certain amount of business. And a colleague of mine and I, who I'm really trying to get to come over to this business, but he will someday, I think. But he and I were consistently the top 2 producers in the company. And our supervisor hated the fact that we were doing so well. So he did everything he could to sabotage my effort. He started taking my clients away from me. He started to try to put candidates into my searches that I was working on. And just a horrible individual. And when I finally, there was one year where I qualified for the trip, Instead of calling me up and congratulating me, he called me up and said, you know, you're one placement away from losing that qualification. Would you rather just have the money instead of the trip because we don't think you're gonna stick? I'm like, well, thank you very much. Congratulations on a good job. No, what you did is you just said we don't think your business is going to stick. And I said, Mark, when have I ever lost that placement? Ever? And he goes, well, we just don't feel it solid. So this was the mindset of the people that I was working with in a career that I thought I loved. Then my last step was as an executive director working for a nonprofit in agriculture, and we were doing lobbying work. And I had a board of directors of 15 men that I answered to. And at the end of the day, it came down to the fact that they decided that even though when I went to work for the company, it was bankrupt and going bankrupt, we basically had 3 months and we were out of business. So I was looking at how do you dissolve a nonprofit instead of how do I make this career successful. And so in 2 years, I turned it around to $1 million in the bank, grew membership, did what I was hired to do, and they decided that wasn't enough, and they let me go. So at that point, like Hunter, I was kind of in a low in my life. What the hell do I do now? This was my career. I'm 62 years old. You know, who the hell is going to hire a 62-year-old washed up woman in a career that, you know, I fought my whole life and I just got terminated. So I walked away from agriculture. And that was hard. That was 40-something years in an industry I loved. Sorry. I didn't know what to do. So I turned to Paige and said, can I sell insurance for a while? So she said, sure. I said, I just want to work for a few years until Dad and I can retire. And then I'm going to go on my merry way. I just need to make money. So she said, sure. So little did I know that this wasn't a job. It was a lifestyle. And I came into it thinking I can sell insurance. I can do anything. So I had to learn a lot of different things here. Basically, I had to go back to being humble and starting over again. Because you don't come into this with the same, like Hunter said, with the same skills and mindset that you had in your previous jobs. You have to learn something new. But the biggest thing is Symmetry gives you all of the tools that you need to be successful here. Everything. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You buy your leads, you make your calls, you book your appointments, you run your appointments, you write business, you will be successful. It's as simple as that. And once you started doing that, you know, when I first started, I was writing business like crazy. In my first year, I did over $300,000 in business. And it wasn't because I was trying to do it my way. It was because I took the system that Symmetry had and I made it work. And I'm determined. I fought my entire career and I put that fight to this. And that's why I got to where I needed to be. Then I went to I won a trip to Marshall Whalen's house and was sitting there and he said, why aren't you building? And I said, because I'm producing. I'm making money. That's what I need to do. And he said, if you put that same amount of effort into producing or into building as you are producing, at the end of the day, you're putting the same amount of time in it. But in 5 years, when you're thinking about retiring, you're going to have residual income coming in the rest of your life. So I started thinking about that. And I thought, you know, that's true. There's a lot to be said about that. And so my next struggle started. I started building and my production went down. And so now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to learn how to balance that production and the building and still get the numbers that I need to do, you know, to make my monthly goal, but also to help other people build their teams. And I've got a few people on this call listening to this, and I hope this resonates with you. You know, helping you get to where you want to be financially. So it's not just a paycheck at the end of the month. You know, it's where you want to be in 5 years. What do you want? Not your why, but your what. What is it that you want? And so, you know, the more I think about that, what I want is to not work the rest of my life. I don't want to sell life insurance the rest of my life. It's rewarding, yes. It's frustrating, yes. It's hard, yes. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, sales came so easy to me. And every job I've had was easy to me, even with the obstacles that were thrown at me. But this job is freaking ass hard. I mean, it is. And don't think you're going to walk into this and have, you know, next month, your bank account is going to be golden and you're going to have $10,000 to go out and spend because it's hard. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have those clients, like Hunter said, that are going to call you everything in the world and hang up on you. And I'm buying digital life leads I'm thinking these people really want it. I got a call, a lead come in this morning at 7. I called her at 7:30. She chewed me out, cussed me out, and hung up. And I'm like, you freaking wanted this. Like a half hour ago, you submitted this lead, and this was a digital life lead. So you're going to get those no matter what level of leads that you buy. Just got to keep doing it. You got to keep calling people because these people requested our help and they want it. You know, maybe she was just having a really bad day and broke a tooth on an almond that she was eating for breakfast. I don't know. Whatever it was, maybe she just wasn't, it wasn't a good time to call her. So those, you know, there's going to be obstacles. If you really want something, you think about your want. Why did you get into this business? What do you want out of life? Where do you want to be next year at this time? Those are the things that will keep you going, not your why. Your why is important, but how many of you really work towards your why? What you're working for is your want. I don't want to work the rest of my life. No, I want to be financially independent. I want to be able to send my children to college. I want to be able to create that, you know, retirement fund that I really want. You know, I want to be able to let my spouse not work so hard or be at home. So what are your wants? What are your wants? And that's what keeps me going. And that's what, you know, kind of is just where I'm going every day. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance the production, how to balance the building. And thank you to Hunter and Paige for being there. You know, also, I do have to say this, you know, Hunter was saying when he went downstairs and was like, this isn't working, people are hanging up on me. And I put in there that thank God Paige is, you know, not buying into the pity pot. When I used to call her, she's like, just keep dialing, and then she'd hang up. Hell, that's what I'm doing. If I call her up and I'm like, these leads suck, she goes, just keep dialing. Just keep following the system. And you know, that's kind of a tough love, but she was right. You know, I could sit there and I could call her, you know, every hour on the hour and complain, and her take on it is, I'm busy, I don't have time for you to complain, do something about it, and then we can talk strategy. So think about it, you know, when you're wanting to just complain to somebody, really think about what you're doing and, you know, what your production looks like. So that's kind of where I'm at on this. And it was a little bit different story from Hunter's, but we all have a story. And just remember, you know, this isn't an easy business, but it's a very rewarding business. And I've seen Paige and Hunter work their butts off for the last 4 years, and they're finally able to really start enjoying what they've worked so hard for. You know, the trips that they take, they go camping, the time that they're spending with little Brooksy. And it warms my heart that they're able to do that, because in a conversation I was having with Hunter the other day, he said, you know, if it takes them 4 more years to get to the top contract level in this company, that's 8 years that they've invested into this career to be financially independent. And I thought, you know, that's for somebody that's in their, you know, early and mid 30s, that's not a bad investment. You know, that's not a bad investment in time. So most of you on this call are fairly young still. You know, you've got 8 years to invest in this to be at the top of the company and be financially independent, and then spend your time helping others get there. So don't give up.
Thank you, Margaret, for sharing your story. And guys, we've run a little bit longer than intended, but thank you all for being on this call today. And I hope, you know, one thing that we all take away from this call is that success here does require you to reinvent yourself. This journey that you're starting on, or that you're on, or that you're coming back to, is not an extension of the story of your life. It's a brand new chapter. So treat it like such. Close the book on that old chapter, mourn it, let it go, and recognize the fresh start opportunity here. Really enjoyed speaking with y'all this morning. Thanks for all your participation, and we will see you later this week. Have a great one.